Hey there, developers, and welcome back to Software Science. Today we have an interesting topic ahead of us: how I think about mobile app architecture. Yeah, this is the blueprint I use for pretty much every other app that I write these days. So let's talk about it. Building apps and getting new requirements, it's always a hectic process. So requirements keep changing, and your project scope is actually, we can say, it's increasing. So you need a framework to actually accommodate most changes. You could have seen that features are taking longer than usual to build. Bugs appear elsewhere. Refactors end up breaking code. Fun enough, even folder structure is usually a mess. Then controllers are becoming a dumping ground for your code. Think of UI code, think of business logic code, think of data code. Every other piece of code is in your controller. So from a point of view, that may seem like an actual working app, but okay, working software is not good engineering. So there's a solution actually. The good news is that architecture is meant to exactly solve these problems. What problems? Well, your app is growing, and well, you know what growth means. Growth means you're adding features and you're adding, swapping Firebase for REST APIs. So that's what growth means. Requirements are changing, so you need to accommodate them in your app. So that's what growth means in this case. So what is architecture? Some of you must associate architecture with folder structure. Organizing your project into folders and giving them names, in as much as that's a good start, that is not architecture. Architecture has to do with deciding where things belong and who owns what. So from that statement, we clearly see that there's some bit of ownership. Who owns what? There's some bit of ownership. So who is who? Okay, an app, or we are building a software. So a software can be divided into pillars. We are looking at responsibilities, boundaries, and dependencies. So architecture itself divides a software into these three pillars. So let's start with the responsibilities. Responsibility gives a particular job or role to a particular layer within your software. So, which means we can actually divide the software into layers, further down into layers. We have the UI layer, we have the business logic layer, and we have the data layer. So the UI layer, specifically, its job is to display state. Displaying state. Later on, we'll discover that an app is just basically a finite state machine. Every screen is describing internal state of the app. So, hence, it's displaying state. Capture input. Input meaning the buttons users press or the text editing inputs that users type their information in, and also react to events. Once the user has clicked a button, so the UI tells the controller, hey, a user has pressed a button. So then it gives the controller the event. So the controller then decides what to do. It runs the business logic, then it returns back an event to the UI, telling the UI, hey, I've finished processing, so do something about it. So then the UI reacts to the event. So as you can see, we've really separated or clearly given the UI layer roles. So the less the business logic it holds, the easier it is to maintain. The business logic is another layer, and this is where decisions are made. So should this happen? Can the user do this? Is this data valid? These questions are answered in this layer. The data layer has a very strict or specific job. Get data in and get it out. So at this point, we're talking about local storage, files, databases, and even your APIs. The second pillar is the boundaries. We all know what a boundary is, yeah? But in this context, a boundary is a line you don't let logic cross. We've done a good job. We've divided our app into layers: the UI, the business logic, and the data layer. And what the boundary is telling us is that we don't want business logic code to leak into the UI. We don't want data logic to leak into the business logic. So with these clear boundaries, actually, there's benefits that come with it. Meaning, a good example, you can swap Firebase for a REST API, and only the data layer changes. You can also redesign the entire screen, and only the UI changes. So there's a pattern. Changes are local and well, very specific. And yeah, that's the goal. That's the actual goal. So without boundaries, you can say that a small change can affect the entire app. Well, that's because your layers, the UI, business logic, and data layer, are tightly coupled. So once the API version changes, well, you have coupled up the UI, the business logic, and your data layer. So now you have to change all of those layers. So thank goodness the boundary is a pillar solves that problem. So the third pillar being the dependencies. Dependencies here are more about direction. Who's allowed to know about whom, and their interaction, or how the interactions happen between the layers. So our three layers should interact, but we're going to use abstraction to interact with the layers. And inner layers should never know the outer layer exists. Hence the point of abstraction again. So with all this in mind, we can see that architecture is not just an abstract concept that you've always heard or seen YouTube tutorials mention. It becomes a set of rules that your code actually obeys, because you have the mental picture of what your software is made up of. You can divide it into layers and you can divide it into pillars. So you actually know how to reason about it. So reasoning about the entire software becomes simple. And now that you've divided your code or software into pillars, the UI, into let's say the layers, you've divided your code into layers: the UI layer, business logic layer, and the data layer. And then, if it's a matter of upgrading or adding new features, you know where to look at. So things become even easier to extend. Testing is also easier because you know where to look at the code, which part of the code has problems. So now you know where every piece of code should go. So introducing clean architecture. Yeah, let's talk about it. Clean architecture. You've heard about it most from fellow developers and even creators out there. So I actually chose this architecture to be my guide, or that to be my choice in every piece of software that I write. And every software that I write today uses clean architecture. So why is this the case? It's predictable. Well, as I've mentioned before, given an app or given a problem to solve into an app, I can have that mental blueprint of the entire app. I've divided it into two pillars. I know about abstraction, and I know about the UI layer. I know about the business logic layer. I know about the data layer. So actually, it's somehow predictable. Okay, I can say that I know how to go about it, even without touching the actual solution. So it's actually helped me solve recurring problems. And it's also testable. Yeah, it's very testable. I mean, I know where to look at. And now that my code is divided into layers, I can test each layer independently. It's also scalable, meaning I can now add new features at each time, anytime I want, and I can only change a specific layer. And it's also maintainable. Well, apart from me who knows about the project, anyone else who cares about clean architecture and has a chance to go through my code can actually follow along. So they too can write code on top of what I've already done. So these are my biggest reasons as to why I chose clean architecture. So as we learn more about clean architecture and interact, we are going to introduce a use case. Yeah. So this is an app. It's called Bitlog, and it's meant for developers like you and me. Well, what for? So with this app, we can create projects. Yes. For example, for an app you're working on, you can just go ahead and create a project, and then you can log features that you're currently working on. Now, the most important thing about this is the updates or the work, the bit of work that you're going to be doing. So we call them updates in this app. So an update meaning you are going to be adding a new feature perhaps, or maybe you're going to be working on a previous feature. So to the app, that's an update. So then we create updates, and then we have sessions. Sessions, consider this like in a sitting, you're working on a particular update, right? Yeah. So the session will actually record the whole time, and it takes the update, then times it. Yeah, it gives it a timer, so then you can just work within that period the session has given you. So this actually, the solution it brings is it helps developers reason about their project in terms of clean architecture. And also it gives them an opportunity to actually to know what they are working on when they sit down. Yeah, so that's the kind of app we'll be building. So apart from helping other developers use clean architecture in their project, it will also help you learn clean architecture as you build the app. So further, all the next videos will build Bitlog from the ground up. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time. Consider subscribing, clicking the like button, and hitting the bell icon for future videos. Thank you.